Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's just jump right into it. Today we're looking at the absolute foundational roots of Indian society, governance, and the economy, spanning a massive 3,000-year period. I mean, we're talking about a time that didn't just shape a single region, it forged an entire subcontinent. The systems of administration and social order they established back then are honestly just fascinating to unpack, so let's get into it. To make sense of this massive sweep of history, we're going to use this agenda to guide us. We'll start with the shift from clans to vast empires, look at ethics and administration, explore the fabric of early society, dive into religion and literature, and wrap up with the ancient economic engine. And here's a quick timeline just to orient ourselves. We are tracing the political evolution from early kin-based communities way back in 2000 BCE, right through the rise of the territorial Mahajanapadas around 600 BCE. From there, you get the foundation of massive pan-Indian empires like the Mauryas, later the Guptas, and eventually the incredibly organized imperial Cholas in the south by the 9th century CE. All right, move into section 1, from clans to vast empires. Now, the concept of the Janapada marks a really profound shift in human psychology. Between 1000 and 600 BCE, society fundamentally shifted its loyalty. You went from being loyal strictly to your family or clan to being loyal to a specific physical piece of land. Janapada literally means where a people set its feet. And this new territorial identity was a game changer because controlling land and trade routes suddenly became the brand new foundation of political power. You can really see this contrast as these societies started scaling up. In the early Vedic period, you had these intimate, kin-based assemblies. The Sabha and Samiti, where local community members literally just gathered together to hash out warfare and policy. But as massive empires like the Guptas and Cholas emerged, that wasn't going to cut it anymore. They required highly structured, decentralized provincial systems called puktis in the north or mandalams in the south just to govern effectively. The whole scale of administration completely transformed. As these empires grew, brilliant political thinkers like Kautilya realized the state had to be viewed as an organic whole. It wasn't just about a powerful king anymore. You needed Kautilya Saptamga, which are the 7 crucial constituents of a state. Things like high ministers, fortified towns, a solid treasury, and reliable allies. Kautilya famously pointed out that one wheel alone cannot move the carriage of government. Every single part of this organic machine had to work together. Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, Ethics, Justice, and Administration. You know, you might actually be surprised to see how advanced early local democracy was. Take a look at the 10th century Uttaramara inscription from the Chola period. It details how local villages used a literal ballot pot system called kudavolai. They would write the names of eligible candidates on palm leaves, drop them in a pot, and have a young child publicly draw the leaves to elect committee members. And here's the kicker. Candidates were strictly required to have honest earnings and a pure mind just to be considered. That focus on civic duty builds into some incredible imperial legacies too. The Junagadh rock inscription in Gujarat is literally a time capsule. Over a span of 700 years, 3 entirely different rulers from completely different dynasties, Ashoka of the Mauryas, Rudradaman I of the Western Satraps, and Skandagupta of the Guptas, all chose the exact same rock to record their public works. Specifically, they were all restoring a vital local lake. It shows this unbroken, centuries-long commitment to public welfare. And that shared commitment to welfare was entirely rooted in the concept of dharma. Derived from the Sanskrit root dhri, which means to uphold, dharma wasn't just religion in the modern sense. It was the ultimate law of existence. It dictated that a king's primary duty, their ultimate moral obligation, was the protection and welfare of all beings. It was the ethical glue of early Indian law. Let's shift gears to Section 3, the fabric of early society. I absolutely love this quote from the Rig Veda. It says, "I am a poet, my father is a physician, my mother is a grinder of corn." Having a poet, a physician, and a corn grinder all living under one roof brilliantly proves that in early Vedic society, social status and occupation were totally fluid. They were not strictly fixed by birth at all. People in the exact same family could pursue completely different professions. But, as we know, society changed over time. The Varna system started as a functional, flexible division based on what you actually did for a living. I mean, even massive rulers like the Mauryas and Guptas came from incredibly diverse backgrounds. There was real occupational mobility. You literally had records of silk weavers changing careers to become archers. but eventually it rigidified. Thanks to factors like intermarriage, migration, and strict endogamy, those flexible varnas splintered into the countless, much more rigid jatis we see later on. To keep this complex society balanced, an individual's life was ideally meant to follow 4 sequential stages, known as the ashramas. It was a literal blueprint for life. You started in brahmacharya, the disciplined stage of studentship, moved into grashatha, family life as a householder, eventually transitioned to vanaprastha, a gradual retirement into the forest, and finally reached samyasa, total spiritual renunciation. It was designed to create both personal peace and social harmony. And when we look at the historical sources, the role of women throughout early Indian history is incredibly dynamic. They were highly active participants in society. In the Vedic period, you have female sages like Apala and Lopamudra actively composing hymns, and women participating in philosophical debates and even chariot races. Sangam literature highlights brilliant poetesses like Avayar. We even see powerful royal women acting as regents like Pravavati Gupta, while later Chola queens funded major temple constructions. Their influence was everywhere. Next up, Section 4, Religion, Knowledge, and Literature. The absolute bedrock of all this intellectual and spiritual inquiry was the Vedas. This is an incredibly diverse corpus of literature. The Rig Veda focused on universal thoughts and early poetry. The Yajur Veda was basically a manual for rituals. The Sama Veda arranged hymns musically, which literally formed the roots of classical Indian music. And the Atharva Veda got super practical, dealing with things like treating physical ailments. It was essentially a comprehensive library of early human thought. But you didn't just study these texts in a normal classroom. Learning happened in the Gurukula system, which was incredibly intimate. Students lived with their guru basically as part of the family. The curriculum was wild, everything from logic and astronomy to medicine, math, arts, crafts, and martial arts. But the real focus was on inner values. The goal wasn't just to prep you for a job, it was to instill truth, humility, and self-control. It was holistic preparation for life. Over time, though, spirituality evolved away from these formal, elite, ritualistic systems. By the 6th century in the Tamil region, we see the rise of the Bhakti tradition. These amazing saint poets, known as the Alvars and Nayanmars, composed deeply emotional hymns that created a direct path to the divine. What they did was effectively democratize religion. They bypassed the complex rituals entirely, making a connection to the divine accessible to everyone, no matter their social class or gender. Okay, final stretch. Section 5, the ancient economic engine. But how did these empires pay for all this? Well, the real MVP of the ancient economy was the Shrini, the professional guild. These were associations of artisans and merchants, but they were way more powerful than just a modern trade union. They regulated product quality, they fixed prices to protect consumers, and honestly, the most amazing part, they functioned as ancient, highly trusted commercial banks. Just to put that into perspective, think about the number 3,000 for a second. The Nashik Cave inscription from the 2nd century CE records this massive endowment where someone deposited 3,000 silver coins directly into a weaver's guild. The guild held that money securely as a bank and then paid out a steady monthly interest rate to fund the monks living in the caves. It is just a staggering glimpse into how advanced early financial institutions really were. Of course, all this commerce was heavily supported by massive state infrastructure. The empires poured money into huge irrigation projects like Sudarshana Lake and the Grand Anichit to guarantee agricultural surplus. The state then took about 1/6 of that produce as revenue. That wealth flowed right along major overland highways like the Dakshinapatha, straight to booming coastal ports like Muziris and Arkamedu. And using standardized, metallic, punch-marked coins, Indian merchants were deeply plugged into global maritime trade, reaching all the way to Rome. So, wrap your head around this as we close out today's explainer. When you look at how early Indians managed their water resources, structured their banking economy, voted with ballots in local assemblies, and traded across vast global networks, aren't we, in so many ways, just building upon the exact same blueprints they drew up thousands of years ago? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me, and keep exploring.